Well, even this seemed to take quite a time, but that's the recording and the transcription both started now. Okay, so as you know, we have been talking about lots of different aspects of GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. This final lecture is actually about a different C, and it's one that we have spoken about before, but isn't officially part of GRC. It's controls. And we did mention when we were talking about compliance that if we were setting up any sort of system, whether that's manual or automatic and IT based, whether we're setting up a system to do that, clearly it makes sense to use the tools that we have to run our organisation the best way that we can. So if we're setting up a system to ensure that we are legislatively compliant, maybe we can use the same sort of system to incorporate the idea that we are continually trying to improve our organisation. And I think the example I used before was about getting back to customers. If you run an online business, there is legislation in terms of the online selling regulations that say how long you have before you must respond to a customer. Smart businesses in that space won't do that. They will say, no, actually, we want to get back to customers much more quickly because it makes customers feel better. It makes them want, not to put too fine a point on it, it makes them want to come back to us and use us again. And if we've got something in place that says, for the sake of argument, customers must be replied to within 7 days, why not put in another rule that says, no, actually, compliance 7 days, but let's actually set our own control that says 48 hours. So whenever customers aren't responded to within 2 days, a report pops up on somebody's screen that says, we're not hitting the targets that we actually wanted to. So that's, in essence, what control is. It's simply taking the same systems. One of those mornings where I forget to mute my phone, and I always feel so annoyed at myself when that happens. We can take the same system that we have been busy setting up. We can use the same software, the same procedures, the same systems, and use that to help our business. So instead of having legislatively mandated triggers, we can set up internal triggers, things that we use ourselves by whatever we define as something not being to our standards, our policies, our approach. And from that, we can endeavour to make our organisation better by understanding where we have not lived up to expectations with our systems. It also allows us to focus in on the organisation, and rather than having equal management time, if you like, it allows us to focus only on areas where our time is required. So if management are running about checking out every system and going, right, are we doing okay? Right, okay, next one. If we have a targeted system that says, oh, well, customer responses are down, should we maybe do something about that? It allows management to focus in on that section and ignore dispatches, which are all running within our own levels. So there's different types of controls, and you'll recognize some of these titles from before. There's preventative controls, something that stops people doing things. The obvious example, not least because you're all logged on to a computer system, not least because we've just spoken about not being able to access a specific document, is access controls. So you have logged on to this system using your student information. And only if you have entered that properly do you get access. And for you, that's probably a username and a password. I don't know if students have been asked to do two-factor authentication. So if I log into a new machine, I certainly need my username and my password, but it also asks me to authenticate. It used to be by sending me a code by text. Now there's an authenticator app that they've authenticated to begin with, and I have to put my fingerprint into my phone to say, yes, it's me, and it's me that's logging in. So we can put in controls like that to prevent people getting access to systems they're not supposed to. And we've done that for ever, hundreds of years, because what else is a lock and key if it's not a preventative control to stop people getting access to things that they shouldn't have? There is absolutely no difference. Just because nowadays you might have a fancy NFC card that opens up an automatic door, it's exactly the same principle. Before, you used to have an iron key, now you've got a plastic card, but the same thing applies. And if it applies to getting into the front door, it should apply to getting into particular offices or server rooms or patient rooms or, well, you decide based on your organisation and your needs. But of course, it's not just about access in that sense. It could be access in any sense. It could be access to people. It could be access to systems. And we've already spoken about the problems we might have if we allow anyone to get access to, for example, the financial system. Why would we? Shouldn't it be people that know what they are doing, people who understand the system and have been given permission to work in that system? That just seems like common sense to me. So the preventative controls can be applied anywhere that you see fit, either manually. You've got somebody in a uniform sitting at the front door, stopping people getting access, or automatically. You've got a computer system set up that says only the person who logs in with these credentials is allowed to transfer money. And even then, it can't be transferred until someone else has signed it off. So the preventative control is both access to the system and to people saying that it's okay. So you'll all be familiar with this. You'll all be familiar with the idea that you only get access to certain things, to certain information, and it's only if you have the right credentials. So all of these things about access control are about giving the right people the right access to the right stuff at the right time. And we've all heard the stories about what happens when that goes wrong. You can barely turn on the television or read the news without seeing, oh, sorry, it's the wrong place. I'll find it in a second. You can barely read the news without seeing reports of people who have not been adequately locked out of their systems. Some of you may have seen news reports that happened the opposite way this week, where hundreds, if not thousands, of employees at Twitter only knew that they had been fired when they tried to log into their system and it wouldn't allow them access. The opposite can happen as well. You forget to take back someone's key, you forget to take back someone's login details, you forget to log someone out of the system. You still give them access to their email so they can pretend to still be with the organisation even when they're not. So we need to set this up, but we shouldn't be blind to the issues. I've said all along there should be segmentation of duties and there should be checks and balances. If you're paying somebody, you should have two people doing it. Well, if you've got a small organisation, that can get very difficult. There's not that many people around, you're not doing so many things. It can be difficult to say, no, you need to leave what you're doing and come and sign off these financial transactions. And actually, there's issues with larger organisations as well, because simply the management and the organisation of that can be much harder. If you've got a large organisation, you might have dozens of people who can pay invoices. How do you manage that and make sure that they're all paying the right invoices at the right time? It can be very difficult. So what you need to do is make sure that if something goes wrong, you can find out about it. Which brings us on to detective controls. We can analyze our systems and see if something happened that we didn't expect, like someone paying when they shouldn't have done. Because quite often what we'll do is we'll set up systems to allow staff some leeway. And you've all come across people that you deal with where the systems are prescribed. Oh no, I can't do that. The computer says I'm not allowed to. Smarter organisations will allow staff leeway. They'll say, okay, well, this isn't the usual thing, but I'm going to override it. And it could be something as simple as you turn up at the supermarket, you try to beep something that's got a yellow sticker on it and it doesn't work. So the people on the shop floor can go along and go, yeah, okay, I can see that sticker and I'll override the price for you. And of course you want that to happen. What you don't want to happen is where someone takes a 50-inch TV, comes up, pretends that they can't beep it, and someone overrides it and puts it through as 3 pounds of onions. So for that, you would have a detective control. What happened to that TV? Why was it suddenly only worth 78 pence? So where you've got complex or fluid business needs, you need to give staff some leeway, but you don't want to take away the oversight. So reports are generated showing what happened, and any issues can be highlighted and investigated if required. Now, for a smaller organisation, that's easier. For a larger organisation, we've just spoken about a supermarket, can you imagine how many price overrides are done by ASDA employees in an hour, never mind a day or a week? Trying to manage that process manually by, I don't know, printing off the transactions, putting them on the manager's desk and saying, go through these and see if anything looks odd, it becomes very difficult. You need lots of people. They need to know what they're doing. They need to have a clear grasp of every single one of the processes and procedures so that they can analyze any issues and decide whether they were okay or not. Which is, of course, why automated systems are so popular. It's why a lot of these systems are being built and implemented by all sorts of different organizations. Oracle, Microsoft, IBM. You can't move for falling over systems that do this kind of stuff. That instead of forcing staff into checking these things, they are automatically done by the system. So you set up an IT system, set up your policies, and allow the system to check whether the policies have been followed. Maybe you only want to allow staff to override 4 items an hour. I don't know if that's reasonable or unreasonable, but or if the original price for something was £100, the the markdown price can't be less than 25% of it, so less than £25. In other words, you can set up all sorts of rules depending on how you want your business to run. And the nice thing is nobody has to remember those, keep them in their heads all the time. Nobody has to go through them thinking, well, which rule applies here? You can just add them into a computer system who for almost no cost, that's a cost to a computer system. So for almost no cost, they can check through all of these procedures and highlight any issues. And of course, part of the system is deciding who to highlight them to. You might have a 2-tier system. Maybe there's people working together. Somebody on the shop floor buzzes through high value items. The manager just ticks them off. Maybe they're working together. So maybe you want a 2-tier thing. Has the manager accepted too many of these markdowns? It doesn't really matter what the rules are or what the criteria are. It's entirely up to you, and it's next to no cost to implement them. And you can check every transaction, everything that happens against the rules that you put in place for next to no cost because you already have the system in there. Now, you'll notice I've not said with no errors. Why do you think that is? Oh no, he's asked us a question. What were we talking about? Oh, I wish I'd been listening. Why have I said fewer rather than no errors?
Is it because humans are still involved, still
Yeah,
feeding the information into the system or whatever?
yep. So we're still feeding the information in. We're still setting those policies. We're still deciding what they should be. We can very easily get them wrong. So that tends to settle down because, again, you notice errors and you fix them. But it doesn't say there's no errors. It also means you have fixed policies. There's no interpretation, oh, well, we'll just do this today. And that can be an issue for a whole bunch of things. Say you have a fixed policy, for example, that says that submissions can't be accepted after a certain date. That policy will continually be challenged. Oh, can I just hand it in a day late or 2 days late or 3 days late? And staff might feel under pressure. But if the policy is there and that's enforced by a computer, people tend to accept it more readily. Well, no, you can't because it's stopped and there's no leeway there. The computer, of course, will look at all of the actions that you've asked it to look at. It won't get tired. It will detect them almost immediately and crucially can be connected to all your other systems. So stock control, accounting systems or whatever. All of those things can feed in to your control system and say, oh, well, maybe we can look at all this other stuff as well and use that to affect how we which rules are implemented, under which cases they're implemented. Maybe, for example, depending on stock levels, the reduction rate on an item goes down. Now, that's the most sensible thing I've heard all morning, Saida, I have to say. Maybe, I don't know, a yellow sticker can get reduced 50%, but maybe if you've got 100 things that need to be sold before they go out of date, they can go to 75% or 80 or 90%. And you'll know that because you've connected it to the stock control system. You know how many things you have in there. You can come up with all sorts of examples yourself where extra information allows you to make a more nuanced decision. Previously, that would have to be done by some staff, presumably staff with a longer, with more experience, who are better equipped to make those decisions. And that then might lead to inconsistencies. One part of the organisation might do it one way, one part might do it another. Doing it this way, you can ensure that your policies and your controls are enforced in the same way everywhere at all times. And of course, if something does go wrong, you know exactly where and when and who, because you've got an audit trail that's automatically created by the computer. And if you do then detect any issues, we're back to mitigation. And again, you'll remember this from before, when we looked at risk. If we find an issue, maybe we want to do some mitigation. Maybe we want to look at policy violations and say, well, maybe there's something we can do in our system to stop that happening again. Any questions? Okay, in that case, as what I want you to think about for this part, and particularly in terms of the case study, is think about access restrictions, preferably non-IT ones. So I've given you one or two examples. Think about where access restrictions might be helpful, and then think about where automating that system would bring benefits to the organisation. Okay, I did promise you a short lecture today, and that is the short lecture. So if no one has any questions or comments, I will stop the recording, and as ever, these will be available on YouTube. I believe I'm up to date. Somebody can let me know if I'm not.